First of all, I would like to thank the organizers to give me this opportunity to share with you our experience in African horse sickness. For me, African horse sickness was one of the diseases that I have to work under more pressures of all my life, and I work in many diseases. And this was under big pressures because Spain is organizing at that time the Olympic Games in Barcelona, and we have to solve the problems before the Olympic arrive, because many people from many different countries never would like to come to Spain during African horse sickness. I understood perfectly the point. But at that time, as I'm going to show you, from the scientific point of view, we have no much idea about African horse sickness virus. And that was a very big challenge for all of us to solve the problem in so little short time. So what I'm going to try to do today is to transfer to all of you the expertise that we win during this year and what kind we learn that cannot be already repeated, unless we try to not repeat that. I'm going to tell you already then, I don't think that during all these times, we really use all the knowledge that we learned during that time at present. So we still are in a very similar situations that the 1987, as I'm going to show you, in particular in the vaccine business. And vaccine, as I'm going to prove you, is the most critical tool that we have to prevent African horse sickness. So this is what I try to tell you today. I also would like to show you here that this is my email, in case that after this meeting you want to ask me any other question. I don't know where is the mouse here. Here is, you have my email as well as our website. And also I will be very happy to send you picture, videos, or whatever do you want to use in the future, in particular on special training programs that we have for African horse sickness, because as I'm going to show you too, one of the most important things is the early detections and to take good actions for this kind of diseases. So let's do it. The history, my history in African horse sickness started in June 1987. Before this disease, I was dedicated mostly to eradicate African swine fever. I always was with African diseases and deal well. This is the ubication of Spain. The location is very important for that kind of things. So in June 1987, 10 zebras came from Namibia. These zebras in Namibia was negative to African horse sickness. Our veterinarian service went there and they established that it was absolutely negative. The zebras came and made the entrance through Lisbon and was divided in two different groups, not just one, two different groups. One group that went to Madrid and the other group was to Alicante. And that was part of the problem, because the situations in Madrid and the situation in Alicante was completely different. In Madrid, 1 month after the zebras came, we started to have trouble with the horses. But in Alicante, everything was perfect. And at that time, from the epidemiological point of view, was complicated to understand that the 10 zebras was related with this problem. You understand? So we have several problems why we spent almost a month and 20 days or almost 2 months to really differentiate that African horse sickness was in the country. So this is very important to learn, because 2 months make it quite a lot of complications, as I'm going to show you in a few seconds. So between June 87 to September 87, the disease was there. They start in July, the clinical problem in Madrid. Nothing happened in Alicante. Of course, the zebra was perfect. And our veterinarians have no too much training in African horse sickness at that time, because, as Mehdi said, the last outbreak was in 1966. So not all the veterinarians, it's more than 20 years, the veterinarians have no idea how African horse sickness look like. So the first outbreak was in 1987 in Madrid, but by the time we detected the disease was already affecting Toledo, Avila, and Segovia. There are provinces surrounded Madrid. And around 250 animals was dead at that time, and we have to vaccinate 38,000 animals in the area. At that time, the only vaccine that was available was the polyvalent vaccine from Onderstepol. One vaccine that is mainly designed to control the disease in endemic country, but not in countries like ours. So some of the animals that have been vaccinated with this vaccine have little peak of viremia. And this little peak of viremia are enough for the culicoides to spread the virus. So that was big complications that we have. I'm going to tell you later the difference between working in Madrid and working in Andalusia. And I'm going to explain you why we spend so much time with the problem in Andalusia and comparisons with the problem in Madrid. So in Madrid, in September 28, 1987, we have the last outbreak, and in January 1988 was declared free. What happened? In October 1988, we have another outbreak in Andalusia and in Cadiz here. Enough, there's no mouse here, and if I do like that, they move. And in the south, in Cadiz, and Cadiz is in a beautiful place, one of the most expensive places in Europe, more high quality, with the higher biosecurity. So the mules and donkeys, forget about that. So how the virus came down? We think it's an illegal movement, from animals that either was carrier of the real virus or vaccinated with one of these viruses that have this peak. And we tried to make many experiments. We did a lot of work to see if one vaccinated animals that is used for polo, like the problem in Andalusia, with the stress of the polo, can release virus and contaminate it with the culicoides other horses. That was a very interesting work, and we never can finish with a very clear solutions. So we still don't know exactly what's happened in the south, but we are quite sure that was an illegal movement from the infected time or with some vaccine that's going down, and they arrived to Andalusia when culicoides was not too strong and appeared the disease in the summer of 1988, 1 year later, just because, as I told you, the virus probably was there. But this illegal movement was quite sure for horses, due to horses. So in the next year, in 80, we have problem in Andalusia, festival here in Cadiz, and the next year we went to Cordoba, Malaga, etc. And we have to vaccinate it with the polyvalent vaccine, 60,000, more, almost 17,000, and with the monovalent vaccine, 70,000 animals, almost 18,000. And here we discovered that the monovalent vaccine was much better adapted to our situation, our epidemiological situations. The peak of viremia was lower than the polyvalent one, and we thought there was a much better solutions to use the monovalent than the polyvalent. But the monovalent was produced in particular because Spain asked to this laboratory to produce. Normally what they have is the polyvalent vaccine. And this is important to keep in mind because still today we have the same trouble. Now, what happened in the south? In the south we have the last outbreak in October 1990, in younger, no vaccinated animals, and we have to keep vaccination until July 1991. So we keep the vaccinations one year more, almost, and that's what's very interesting. I'm going to show you why. And Spain was finally declared free in November 1993. So what is the main difference between working in Madrid area and in Andalusia area? I summarize for you two important issues that are quite different. The first one, and probably the most important, is the temperature. If you look to Andalusia, in January, there is no any area below zero. No, absolutely a single area below zero. Normally the areas are between 8-10 degrees. So that means that the culicoides could be happy in these situations. In Madrid, they are not so happy. because winter is really winter. Not this year. This year is a spring. but I think this is the climate changing is making crazy. But normally in Madrid, there is really cold. So the horses in Andalusia are in the evening outside, even many at night too. So they are very good target for culicoides. In Madrid, we have all horses inside at that time. So there was many factors that make a big difference. But there is another important issue that I want to share with you, and is that in Andalusia was more difficult for us, more difficult to convince the farmer to vaccinate the horses. Why? I'm going to explain you. Because when we use the vaccine in Madrid, everybody learned that these horses are going to have antibodies probably all life, because the vaccine was attenuated vaccine. So this is already known by all the owner in the south as well. And most of our horses at south are traveling a lot, not just in Spain, around the world. And they traveling a lot because they make money traveling, they make money to do to give semen, etc. So they said, well, this is my business. I prefer to play the risk of have the disease before kill my horses, because it's going to have antibodies forever. And this is very important, because I always said that African horse sickness is quite different at many other diseases that I has been the chance to work, because the horse is completely different and the owner is completely different than a sheep or a cow or many other animals. And you have to consider the sociology of this disease. And this is one of the things that we learn more. The sociology of this disease is completely different than the sociology of other diseases. I always said to my students that the veterinarian work with two types of animals: animals with no name and animals with name. And when you work with animals with name, be careful. You are talking about family, not animals. So this is make quite a big difference. And that's what's very important. And I'm going to tell you when I really discovered that situation. So the situation was in the south more complicated, was so complicated that in 1989 we spread the virus with our good friends, the Moroccans and the Portuguese as well. It's proving that the virus is not only moving by animals' movements. Not only that. No. The culicoides move. And we have already a model that also, if you want, I can supply you the paper, will prove how the situations can go between the south, the north of Africa, to Iberian Peninsula and vice versa, as well as to other European countries. We did that model using all the dash that we have information. But this is another history. But if you want, you just send me an email and I send you the paper. So sorry for that, Mehdi, we give you back the virus 25 years later. And I remember, the best thing I remember of all these things was to know these people, because this is what we call the three African horse sickness tenors. But you can see here in the picture that at that moment I was the only one singing. But here is Mehdi, Stefan, and myself, that since that time we work a lot, but not only in African horse sickness, and many other diseases, and blue tongue, and many of the ones that are affecting our area. So let me give you an idea what's happened in 1987, and you're going to see if there is a big difference with 2016, okay? This is important. And where is the difference? At that time, the virus was not known at all. That was the first challenge we had. Today, we know a lot about the virus. This is much better solution. At that time, the poor diagnosis was very poor. We only have complement fixations that took a lot of time, and seroneutralization that took a lot of time as well. So we don't have a good tool to fight against the disease at that time. Today, we have fantastic, much better technology and much better evaluated at that time. So this is also wonderful news. The third point, we only have at that time polyvalent live vaccine at the beginning of the outbreak. And I am afraid that we are still in the same situation today. So it's a big point to talk. And we did a lot of research and vaccination. And today there are beautiful candidates for this new vaccine. And this is an important issue, but there still is not a good trial to really testing in a massive way this kind of vaccine. In a massive way, it's important for one vaccine. That's why I'm going to show you this data from Spain, because it was a very massive, the data that we use in vaccination. And the last point, also we are better, thanks to African horse sickness and also thanks to blue tongue. We know more about the locations of the culicoides, but we don't know too much about which one are more effective. We know Imicola is terribly effective, but we don't know if other culicoides like Obsoletus or other are also as well as good as Imicola. This is something we need to do it. Now, in that time, our group have to work in virology and understand a little more about the molecular studies of these proteins, the role of the protein, which protein was more important and which protein was not important, which one was the best to select it for diagnosis. So at that time, we learned a lot with sequencing, with cloning, and we adapted a fantastic technology for the time. We cloning proteins, we learned a lot about the structural proteins, the non-structural proteins. We cloning the VP7, the NS3. I'm going to tell you later why NS3. And we put ELISA test that was very quick, very useful for antibodies detections using a subunit protein. So we cloning VP7 and we use VP7 and VP2 and VP5. So we have a fantastic situations to work with the disease. But when I was sending to the other province laboratories the ELISA, I received several phone call from these laboratories and tell me, Jose, you are sending me an ELISA plate with 96 well, because at that time only was the 96 well, was not like now that we have line of ELISA. And we only use for 7 horses or for 3 horses sometime, and we have to throw everything away. So you have to adapt it, any test that can be more for single cases. So we start to working and adapted the Western blot test. And before we released the Western blot test, I asked to many people around the world, send me Sarah to testing that Western blot was very good. And one day we found this picture. So you see here, these are the structural proteins. So all the animal that has been vaccinated with attenuated vaccine or infected react with the structural protein as well as with the non-structural protein. But in the right, we found horses that only react with the structural proteins. And so we was working at the laboratory. You know, the laboratory people never believe too much, so we said, okay, we repeat that. And we repeat, and again, we have the same results. So, okay, have to look where these horses come from. These horses was sent to me from Michel Lombard, de Merial. And I called Michel and said, Michel, I am working in Western blot for African horsiness. You send me some horses, and these horses are very funny in the reaction. So he said, why you are funny? It's the first thing Michel told me, why are you so funny? And I said, well, I think it's interesting. Can you tell me where these horses came? And he said, yes, these horses belong to the king of Morocco and are horses that we vaccinated with a special vaccine that we are doing for African horse sickness. It's an inactivated vaccine. And we prove on the very high volumes horses in the king of Morocco. That's why I'm lucky the king, because he showed me this. So I tell, hey, Michel, take more of this serum and come to Madrid, because I think you not only have a good vaccine, you probably have a market vaccine. So he came to Madrid, because the situation is like that. All the horses in the left that was vaccinated with attenuated vaccine or with was infected, they react with both. But the ones that has been vaccinated with the Merial serotype 4 African horse sickness never react with the non-structural protein. So that was very important because it was one of the first time that we discovered the role of the non-structural protein as a potential marker. It's true that this is not useful for other serotypes because non-structural 3 change a lot and between serotypes or among serotypes. But for African horse sickness, serotype 4 was very important. And let me tell you one thing. This was critical to convince many of the owners that have fantastic and very high volume horses to vaccinate these horses, because there are a possibility that their horses can be traveling around and the people will accept it, this situation, like happened with Argentinians and many other countries after these situations. And I learned at that time that the most critical thing in African horse sickness vaccine is to have a DIVA vaccine, a clear DIVA no-life vaccine. This is very, very important. And I found that this is a secret for that situation because the owner of the horses don't want to play with situations that can be not useful for their horses in the future. And that was very critical. So we adapted the VP7 and ELISA with a VP7 and an NS3. And as you can see here in this picture, there is a clear difference between animals that was infected or vaccinated with an attenuated vaccine against the ones that have the inactivated vaccine. So about the clinical picture that I also have to cover, I think that Alan did a fantastic job. So I'm going to be very quickly. I absolutely agree that the most typical clinical signs that you can see is exactly this one, the edema. But what I want to tell you is that it's very important to training your veterinarian to really discover this disease that don't have clinical pathognomonical lesions or anatomopathological lesions. So they have to be very important. And I think this is terribly important. And as also, I would like to tell you, we have an infectious but not contagious diseases, but we have 9 serotypes. 9 serotypes, that is quite complicated. And there is 4 classical forms that has been perfectly defined and clarified by Alan, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But I have to tell you that it's very important to tell you that still we don't know exactly why the same virus and the same animal can be different and show one clinical form or another clinical form. It's not clear why the same virus and the same isolate, not just the virus, the same isolate can induce different type of picture. And this is very important to teach to the veterinarian because can be confused with that point. So in Spain, what we saw was the pulmonary form, the cardiac form. We don't see the mixed form, and we don't see the African horse sickness fever form. So we see the first 2 ones that, as Alan said this morning, the first one is the more dangerous, the more aggressive. Second one is also aggressive. I'm going to tell you the difference. Why I also put you this other figure here in the left? Just to remember you that zebras have a very long viremia, very long viremia. So zebras are probably the worst target as a carrier that you have to do it. So wildlife have to be very carefully if you are going to do any move, because this animal, as I told you, Namibia was negative, and they took a trip that was too long because they told us that it will be a short trip by plane, was by boat, and of course they infected and the trip. That's quite clear. Now what we saw in the more aggressive, we saw in naive animals and not vaccinated, we have fever between 40-41 and respiratory disorder, and the mortality could reach the 95%. It's around 65, 70 to 95, but could reach the 95% of mortality. And what we saw more, this is in Spanish, we found exudate, we have congestion in trachea with liquid, was ascites, very big ascites, as you saw on the videos. We also have exudates that have blood sometimes, and interstitial lobular congestions, and also congestion in the stomach. And in the cardiac form, the ones that we see more was this edema, the supraorbital edema, and also the supraorbital edema and the conjunctivitis. We also see the edema intramuscular with gelatin, yellow gelatin. This is very, very characteristic. Hydropericardial, and we also have hemorrhagic endocardial. I also have some videos in case you need this information. Is time already? Oh my goodness. So I'm sorry. Okay, I go fast. Control, okay? Okay, in prophylaxis in Spain, we use the polyvalent vaccine at the beginning. We changed 1 year later, a little less than 1 year, to the monovalent serotype 4 that Ondestepor very nicely produced for us. And in the last moment of the outbreak, just almost finished the outbreak, we used a little doses, almost an experimental situation, and for very high volume horses in the inactivated one. At that time, we have good and fast techniques. The control of movements are critical, and also avoid the contact with the host and the vector. So we use the live modified mono and poly, the inactivated, and we did also a recombinant vaccine that never has been used on field, but experimentally was working quite well. So what are the big advantages and disadvantages that we found between one another? In the polyvalent vaccine and the monovalent is much better. The monovalent for us was less problem with the monovalent than with the polyvalent. Advantage, they give a long protection. But at that time, these long protections could be bad for the horses because they give you long protections almost forever. So the animals is marked for a long period of time by serology. And this is not good for the horse's honor. It's relatively cheaper than the other one. It's so cheap. The viremia is long, and they can be transmitted by culicoides because they have peak of viremia with enough doses of virus to be transmitted by the culicoides. Another advantage is that there are many serotypes, so you can buy it already with polyvalent or monovalent. You can ask it to produce. And the vaccinations, the problem is that you cannot vaccinate it in the presence of culicoides. So you have to limit the vaccination time to not use on culicoides time. Otherwise, from the epidemiological point of view, you will be crazy because you're going to see the disease that is spreading very quickly. And what's spreading was the vaccine, not so quickly the disease. Now, there are commercial available. People talk about resourcement, but we don't see any resourcement at all. We characterize the virus many years later. It's the one that we have at that time. We don't observe any resourcement. And the other problem is that it's only valued for horses. So we conclude of this point that attenuated vaccine is a good for disease control, but not probably the best for eradication. Now, the inactivated vaccine, they have potential DIVA. I told you, only for serotype 4 is clear and proof. For other serotypes, probably it's not working good. They give short protection, so you need two doses, but you have able to vaccinate during the culicoides seasons, so that's very good, because sometimes the disease arrives in culicoides season, so it's important to vaccinate it when the culicoides are there, because the disease arrives with culicoides and spread with culicoides. At that time, we only have serotype 4. Today is not available. We don't have any negative reaction at all. It's more expensive, and also only for horses. And so we think this is a good tool at that time for control the disease and eradications. So some ideas to take home, and I'm leaving. We must be aware of the potential risk of African horse sickness in Europe and be ready for that. Our situation in some aspects are similar to the situation of 1987, in particular, two problems, the training and the vaccine. I think this is important. The training of the private veterinarian, not the government's veterinarian, the private veterinarian. But for me, the privates are very important because they are the first eye of the problem. They are with the horse. The other have to be called, but the other guys are there. And these are very important, and I think we have to do that. We do simulations with that, and I can supply you the material if you want. So what we need, in my opinion, we need good training and the private veterinarian for early detection to know exactly the diagnosis, and we need vaccine. We need a bank of safe and DIVA vaccine, a good contingency program, and more research and training is needed. And the most important, I know you know what I'm going to tell you, but don't forget, a horse is not a sheep. It's not a sheep. And this is very important. So sociology is very important. And that's it. Thank you very much, my friend. Thank you. Thank you.